we sort of also need to remember that South Africa is known as the fatherless nation. You know, men aren't in the homes to begin with, you know, and it's sort of a cycle that perpetuates toxic masculinity. Young boys don't really have male mentors to look up to. They don't have father figures to look up to. We get women that are blamed for raising toxic men, whereas, you know, it's just too much of a heavy burden on everybody involved. We blame the women on things that they don't have control over, and we blame young
their
boys.
fault.
And then we blame young boys for growing into unhealthy men without realizing that this too was just a child somewhere that didn't know right from wrong, really. And I'm not making excuses for men that can unlearn. Unlearning is a self-responsibility that we all have to embark on. But, you know, we sort of need to see toxic masculinity for what it is, and that is an everybody issue. And as much as GBV is an everybody issue, toxic masculinity is definitely a woman's problem as well. We sort of need to understand where we perpetuate toxic masculinity. You know, it's not a problem that you can approach only from one side. If we're going to get to the root cause of gender-based violence in its entirety, we're going to target young boys and teach them gender-based morality. We're going to try and understand the male experience and not really speak to the symptoms of the male experience, which is abuse and suicide and right? So we want to understand the male experience to sort of find out what's going on. Like, gents, what's going on? Because what GBV does is that it causes men to die by suicide, and it causes men to kill people, to kill women, not only women, but every other person. You know, we know that the statistics tell us that violence is most likely to be committed by a man, to a woman, and to a child, right? So we sort of want to really de-root that from its cause. Where are our fathers? Where are our healthy role models? What is it that we're doing to the male child that is going to stop this from being replicated into the next generation, you know? And different concepts surrounding like GBV, we can look at refugees for survivors of gender-based violence, and that's very needed, and immediate relief is very needed. We can look at counseling the survivor of gender-based violence. We can look at all these concepts that speak to the symptom, but once we're not de-rooting it from its core root, we're not going to get anywhere.
To your point, Bobby, I think, you know, in general, our society is patriarchal. It's deeply entrenched in, you know, our institutions, in our relationships, in our families, in our cultures as well. And it is something that even, you know, women, because we have, internalized misogyny, internalized patriarchy, we perpetuate it as well due to the system and the concept of patriarchy. So I think that's an important point.
I think also going back to your definition of gender-based violence, Mamohau, and how that relates to the emotional, the physical, the psychological, the sexual, and the financial. We understand like you said, the symptoms of toxic masculinity, but in the name itself, gender-based violence, it is violence on the basis of somebody's gender. It is not because you are a woman, I'm going to hurt you. It's because I haven't been taught the respect for your gender, for your sexual orientation, for your expression as a human being. And I think when you fundamentally break toxic masculinity down, it's a lack of two things: empathy and respect. In my opinion, at least. And I'm glad that we all kind of agree on that. Because once you empathize with somebody, you can put yourself in the position and say, I don't want that to happen to me. Because my father hurt me. My absence of a father even hurt me. Whoever it may have physically abused me, I have the empathy within myself to know that I never want somebody to feel the same way that I felt again. And then moving on to the respect side of it is, if you respect somebody's body enough, if you respect their mind, their intellectualism, their emotions,
them as human.
if you see them as human, you will give them the courtesy and the respect to have informed consent, to give people the opportunities to become emancipated, whether it's psychologically or financially. So toxic masculinity also relates to those two things.
I'd like to pose a question, and I think being here, I'd like to play devil's advocate, right? We know that gender-based violence is violence perpetuated because of your gender, right? Like, that's what the definition of gender-based violence means. So can men experience gender-based violence? And can women be perpetrators of gender-based violence? And what do you guys think before I say my bit?
Well, just based on the concept of, how we have defined gender-based violence, of course men can experience gender-based violence. It just so happens that specifically in our country, it is highly perpetrated against women, alarmingly so.
Yeah.
And so, as Sasha said, we need to look at that and look at the root causes of why, gender-based violence for us manifests in this way against women, against children as well.
And I also want to further say that what then are the forms of gender-based violence that men can experience in a South African context? I know we touched on, the whole financial aspect to gender-based violence in the household. Can we say that the narrative of the men being the head of the house is a form of gender-based violence against men? Because we do know that traditional masculinities are a leading cause in male suicide rates. So is that a form of violence, a form of gender-based violence that is perpetuated against men?
I would say no. The same way that I'm going to use a bit of a crude example. I would see gender-based violence towards women is a pedestrian standing on the side of the street and the vehicle swerving and hitting you intentionally. Gender-based violence towards men is a man jaywalking and somebody accidentally hitting them. So the intentions of the two are very, very different. And specifically in our capitalist model in South Africa.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
That's a very good way to put it.
And I think in the capitalist model in South Africa, specifically looking at our history in apartheid, Black women weren't allowed to work.
Yes.
Our history has dictated that women will forever be economically disenfranchised until we step away from this, economic system that consistently perpetuates men being the breadwinners, specifically Black men. And when we're talking about being the breadwinners, we're not talking about having a mansion and 6 figures in the bank account. We still know that a majority of the men who are the head of the households are probably working 10 to 12 hours a day, aren't able to see their families because they're trying to put food on the table. And a majority of that is because men have access to a lot more blue-collar jobs than women.
Absolutely.
You very, very rarely see women on construction sites working in the government. You see women as cleaners, domestic workers, housekeepers, carers, nurses. These very, very... it's a very limited field that women can go into, which don't give you that economic development within yourself and upskilling to further your careers. Whereas men specifically have the opportunity to move up the economic ladder, start at the bottom, work their way up. So I think that the culture that's been developed in our current economic system is that men are the breadwinners because of how this society has been constructed, not by men's own volition.
And I think another way to look at it would be the power dynamic of it all, right? Men do have power as a collective. And again, this is not to say that all men hold power. We do know that it's very intersectional. We do know that Black men hold less power than white men. We do know the nuances of it, but collectively women are oppressed. And that doesn't mean that one single woman cannot be empowered. I just want to remind anyone out there that when we sort of talk about gender-based violence perpetrated against men, it doesn't change the fact that collectively men do hold power in society. Well, this has been the hashtag Do What's Right conversation by the Fakes, continuing our conversation on gender-based violence. Today we unpacked on misogyny. I myself have learned so much. I learned about the Lolita effect. I learned more on men being, the breadwinners of the home and what that can look like in our everyday lives. You can learn too by staying tuned and following at the Fake ZA on all social media platforms and catch us where it's at. You don't want to miss this. Bye.